There are many ways to create a memorable film thriller. You can create characters who embody evilness at a previously unseen level. You can go for the jump scares. Or you can follow the lead of masters of the genre and build up the suspense with a combination of visuals, storytelling, and great characterization. For this episode of When the Pictures Got Bigger, I want to focus on the latter and look at one classic example of thriller filmmaking that resulted in, for my money, one of the scariest films ever. A type of children's fairy tale that enters a haunting and twisted path of deceit and criminal activity which lasts with audiences long after the closing credits. I'm talking about 1955's The Night of the Hunter. It's a movie which needs to be seen by more film fans. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's available on the Criterion channel and also streaming on Amazon Prime at the time of this video's release in June 2024. So I definitely suggest you give it an initial or even repeat viewing before digging deeper into the psychopathic behaviors of the film's villain. Feature Harry Powell as played memorably by Robert Mitchum. Along the way, I also want to provide some of the backstory behind the inspiration for the film, a movie which was the only film ever directed by Oscar-winning actor Charles Laughton, and which was quickly converted from a popular 1953 debut novel into a film adaptation. Laughton also co-wrote some of the screenplay, but it was mostly penned by screenwriter James Agee, who had adapted The African Queen for the screen and who had also written some dialogue for The Quiet One. This would sadly be Agee's final film script, as he would tragically die of a heart attack at the young age of 45, a few months before The Night of the Hunter was released to theaters. The novel and screenplay both lifted real-life elements from the awful crimes of West Virginia killer Harry Powers, who preyed on multiple victims, mainly women along with some of their families, in the American South and Midwest during the Great Depression. In this fact or fiction playlist entry, I'll also be sharing some more information on the real events that inspired one of film history's darkest villains ever. It's a story of love versus evil, and it's now time to travel along with Preacher Powell to see where the journey takes us. The movie opens memorably with the silent film acting great Lillian Gish sharing a biblical lesson with some children, a theme which the movie will return to time and time again. Gish was in her 60s when The Night of the Hunter was released, yet she still looks elegant and retains much of the childish beauty that had made her one of America's sweethearts during the era of silent film decades earlier. Almost all of her 100 movie or shorts roles were finished during the silent film era, but she would continue to occasionally appear on film and television until well in her 90s, with her final cinematic role coming in 1987 as she and Bette Davis played sisters in The Whales of August. In a film which moves blindingly fast for almost all of its 92-minute running time, the first words spoken in the film, verses from the Bible that Gish's Rachel Cooper character shares with the children she cares for, set up the premise of the movie.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves.
The audience won't see Gish again until the film is more than half over, but very quickly is introduced to the false prophet Miss Cooper is warning her wards about, Mitchum's Harry Powell, as he's driving a car through some idyllic southern towns. The overhead shots helping to introduce Mitchum to the screen also set up our first death in the film, a female body killed by some unknown forces that's never explained in the movie but that audiences can infer was a previous victim of the film's wolf in sheep clothing. Continuing to move rapidly, we are also introduced to the Harper family. The patriarch Ben, as played by Peter Graves, is arrested by local police after a bank robbery and double murder, but not before hiding $10,000 in his daughter's favorite doll, a secret witnessed by Ben's two children, with a warning to keep the secret and money hidden. These two children, a boy John, who is probably about 10 years old, and a young girl Pearl, who might be 4 or 5, keep the secret hidden from their mom Willa, played by Shelley Winters. Preacher Harry arrives to the Harper household and explains to the Harper family that he knew Ben in prison, and while he may just be sharing death row messages from the children's father, his true motivations are sketchy from the start. Again, The Night of the Hunter does a masterful job of advancing its narrative swiftly. It doesn't take long for the film to reach its cat and mouse objective, can these two youngsters conceal the stolen money's location from the new entrant into their family's hierarchy. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that Preacher Harry quickly woos and then proposes to Willa. While Winters had a plethora of memorable roles in a 7 decades-long film and TV career, her character in The Night of the Hunter isn't written with a depth of emotion or really even too many significant minutes in the script. Willa is now a widow after her husband has been hanged for his crimes, and the role is crafted more as a one-dimensional figure who admires the qualities and opportunities that Preacher Harry Powers could theoretically offer her family. Mitchum's false prophet character certainly fools many impressionable figures in the movie, perhaps including Willa and definitely including her young daughter Pearl, but almost certainly not the 10-year-old John. Visually, the scenes that revolve around the children's attempts at avoiding Preacher Harry's attempts to find their dad's stolen money are some of the most striking images one will find on film. Cinematographer Stanley Cortez was a master of capturing the story's essence with the use of light and shadow. Witness his work in other classic films such as Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons or the 1957 film The Three Faces of Eve. I could probably devote a whole video to the river scene, where John and Pearl try to stay one step ahead of Harry by taking a rowboat down a quiet stream, while being scrutinized under the careful eyes of a menagerie of river critters, such as turtles, frogs, owls, and rabbits. This river montage is simply stunning camera work, invoking the best of German Expressionism or memories of silent film pioneer D.W. Griffith. As film critic Terence Rafferty wrote in an essay for the Criterion Collection release of the movie, when John and Pearl are sleeping in their fragile craft on the river, and with the night animals keeping vigil, you feel as if you were inside their heads, dreaming a child's dreams, part blind terror and part sweet hope. Another memorable scene also involves water imagery, but in a totally different context. Preacher Harry kills off-screen his new bride Willa shortly after he refuses her romantic advances on their wedding night, while quickly converting her into an active participant in his community religious revival meetings. She finally begins to suspect his true intentions, and while audiences don't see her murder on screen, we do see her haunting body floating underwater later, after a bedroom confrontation in another masterfully shot sequence by Cortez and Laughton. Eventually, the children make their way to a farm run by Gish's Rachel Cooper, and the film surprisingly turns somewhat into a Christmas movie. The gift exchange scene, where John Harper offers a makeshift present of a wrapped apple to his protector, is one of the sweetest moments you'll watch in thriller film history. If Die Hard can be considered a Christmas film, an indisputable movie fact that shouldn't be questioned here, so too would I like to propose that The Night of the Hunter very successfully uses its holiday scenes to set up some of its thriller-filled climax. The audience may be temporarily lulled into a false sense of holiday security, but make no mistake about it, the intense suspense of this story is going to quickly return to spoil most of the seasonal family charm. When Mitchum eventually shows up at Cooper's farm after learning of the children's whereabouts in a creepy confessional scene involving his interactions with a 15-year-old girl, audiences get to next watch more of the cat and mouse interplay, this time between Mitchum and Gish. Unlike almost all of the other female characters in this film, Gish's Rachel Cooper is no victim. She sees quickly into the rotten core of Mitchum and spots the evil behind his charming smile and melodic tones. Mitchum is certainly the star of The Night of the Hunter. His performance as the terrifying, yet in many ways sniveling and cowardly town preacher is mesmerizing, and a role many critics would later say was his finest performance on screen. Some audiences, perplexed by the buffoonish actions of the villain, apparently laughed nervously when watching the movie in theaters upon its release. Seen today, you very well may also be laughing at times at how comically inept Preacher Harry Powell comes across on camera. Perhaps that was the goal of director Laughton, a lesson that may be lost on many of today's horror film crafters. There's no reason to overdo the legion of immorality that characters can inflict on their prey. Sometimes it's more effective to show a monster who is so bad that they are portrayed as inept. But this was an approach that was certainly ahead of its time in 1955. Perhaps for that reason, it may be no surprise that the film was not well appreciated by either movie audiences or critics upon its release. Thankfully, it has gained a dramatic rise in popularity over time. In fact, French magazine Cahiers du Cinéma, I hope I pronounced that right, proclaimed it as the second best movie ever made behind just Citizen Kane back in 2008. Whether audiences at the time weren't quite ready for the antagonist portrayal, there's certainly nothing funny about the real-life figure who Grubb and Agee used when creating the fictional Harry Powell. The real-life details of this villain who inspired the book and movie character, the 1920s serial killer Harry Powers, are still shocking a century after his crime spree likely began. Powers was a Dutch-born drifter who preyed on victims in several states in West Virginia, Illinois, and Iowa throughout the 1920s, until finally being captured and arrested in Fairmount, West Virginia in 1931. The full extent of Powers' murder spree may never be fully known, but included the horrific deaths of a similarly widowed mother named Asta Eicher, and her 3 children, as well as another woman, Dorothy Limke, with perhaps dozens of additional victims who were never officially connected to the serial murderer. These were brutal crimes, and the ultimate arrest, trial, and hanging of Powers also played out in real time in blinding speed back in 1931. The 2013 novel Quiet Dell by author Jane Ann Phillips put the story back in the national limelight by taking the unique approach of telling the details of Powers' final murders from the imagined perspectives of the Eicher family. Audiences who can't quite shake the tense moments of The Night of the Hunter should consider reading Quiet Dell. The novel derives its title from the name of the small West Virginia hamlet in which Powers' final victims were discovered. The novel masterfully juggles the themes of death, loss, and transcendence, with most of the final half of the book focusing on the real-life trial of the serial killer. I've given away a lot of the plot moments of the classic 1955 film, and the last thing I want to do is take away from your appreciation of this amazing movie by sharing the full ending. Hopefully this video has inspired you to sit down for a repeat viewing of Laughton's masterpiece. I won't go into details of the final few minutes of the movie, except to say that the blinding pace of the film returns near its finale. The town's members call for justice in a call for a lynching that echoed the real West Virginia townsfolk reactions once Harry Powers was arrested in 1931. But perhaps one final switch from the real-life events that inspired the story is how the movie treats these moments of mob justice. In reality, during the early stages of the Great Depression, Powers was almost lynched by a West Virginia horde, but ultimately he did go to trial, was found guilty, and subsequently hanged. In The Night of the Hunter, it's slightly unclear whether the movie mob is chasing solely after Mitchum's preacher Harry Powell, or also blaming and trying to act their own justice on some of his victims, the Harper children and Rachel Cooper. This blurring of criminal activity, mixing in the consequences of perpetrator with its victims, is another intentional act of filmmaking that was likely ahead of its time. Laughton sadly was only able to direct this one film, and in the twilight of an amazing acting career, he concentrated mainly on stage work. He would follow The Night of the Hunter by appearing in 1957's Witness for the Prosecution for director Billy Wilder, a role for which he received his 3rd Academy Award nomination, and then in 1960 in Spartacus under the watchful eye of director Stanley Kubrick, with his final role coming in 1962's Advise and Consent with director Otto Preminger. Many of those Laughton roles on screen are certainly worth seeing, but he only left us one example of what he could accomplish behind the camera, the stunning Night of the Hunter. I'm not really going out on a limb here by saying it's the greatest movie ever directed by an individual in their lone directorial effort. Although the movie can be hard to categorize, I'm labeling it a thriller, but you could easily call it a film noir, or an example of Southern Gothic filming, or maybe even a comedy. Whatever genre you want to place it in, it could be penciled in near the top of that category. Please feel free to offer your thoughts on this classic film in the comments section below. And if you agree with some of this criticism, be sure to click the like button, as it does help our channel continue to grow. Until the next time, I'll see you at the movies.
Once upon a time there was a pretty flower.